And hey, we're live. I'm Andrea Johnson. I am the Intentional Optimist, and I'm coming to you today with a new friend and a really exciting, fun thing to talk about today. This is Dr. Angela Mulrooney. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me here, Andrea. I appreciate it.
You know, if you haven't listened to my podcast episode from this week, then you've missed her story. And it is quite an interesting story. It is a story of tragedy and triumph and all kinds of pivoting and understanding and learning. And she's landed where she is today, which is pretty cool. But we don't have time today to go through all of that. So if you want her story, just go over to the Intentional Optimists Unconventional Leaders podcast. It is the most recent episode, episode 74. And I believe it's called the same thing as your company, Unleashing Your Influence, which who doesn't want to influence other people?
It's very
So,
true.
I mean, and John Maxwell, I'm a John Maxwell team coach, and he says that leadership is influence, plain and simple. Right. So as we lead ourselves and we lead others, then that gives us an opportunity to learn and to do it the way that it needs to come from us. And that's part of what I enjoyed, is like finding out that the best way to influence people is from our own voice, exactly who we are. So what I'm going to do is, you have some slides that you're going to share with us to kind of give us a walkthrough of the brand archetypes. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we're going to take a macroscopic view of the 12 big archetypes that exist in the world. There's actually 60 in total, but 60 would take us hours to go through. So we're just going to go through the big 12, and what you'll see is some recognition of yourself in there. It will start giving you some information on how you operate in the world, words that you use, all that kind of stuff, so that you start to be able to build that foundation for your brand as you move forward.
Well, and for those of you who may not have a brand right this minute, you actually kind of do.
You do.
As Mike would say, you are the brand. And you do have a way that you show up. And what's interesting is that when you start looking at this stuff, and I'm going to let you go ahead and pull your slides up, but as you start looking at these, you'll be surprised. And then afterwards, I have some insights because I took your quiz. So I have some insights to share from other quizzes I've taken and some questions for you. So I'm excited. So why don't you go ahead and put your slides in there, and we'll get the screen share going, and you can kind of walk us through.
Perfect.
I'm actually really excited to do this. For those of you who have not taken any kind of a brand archetype quiz, it is just one of those things that helps you say, well, why does Nike do it that way? And why does Oprah do it that way? And I'll be really interested to see how it all turns out. So here we are. I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can take it away.
Perfect. So we are going to be going over brand archetypes today. And the reason I like using brand archetypes is it really sets that North Star of everything that you're doing, from the content that you're putting out there to how you have your sales calls to how you even operate in the world on a day-to-day basis. It really just creates that amazing foundation that you can keep referring back to over and over again. And it will help you to actually get way more comfortable with who you are, because you're going to start to see that you're not a freak. There's other people out there who are just like you, and you're going to be able to attract those right people to you. Your brand archetype affects everything. It affects your presence. It affects how you interact, and it also affects the kind of content that you're putting out there. And so the more you dig into it, and if you take the quiz, it will give you a series of emails that will help you to look at your archetype from a few different perspectives and help you have that deeper understanding. What I find, unfortunately, with most people is when they're trying to create a brand, whether it's a personal brand or it's a corporate brand, they tend to be very confusing to the market, especially if they are one of those high-level professionals. They have too many offerings, they have so many talents, and they want to share everything that they have with everyone. And what that does is it makes it unclear to people who you are and what you actually can do for them. Also, what happens is we create too perfect of content, because especially as a professional, we have this albatross around our neck of the fact that we're supposed to be a professional. But and all that means is that we have a professional degree. It is not a set of decorum that we're supposed to follow. It is not behaviors. It is just, we have a professional degree, and that's how we're supposed to operate, is using our information properly as a professional. But what it does is it tends to really hold us back, and makes us think that we have to be a certain way. And so then we get in our head, we don't allow our personality to show, we don't allow our passion to show. And it really is prohibitive in building what we want to build. And oftentimes for professionals too, we are too in the weeds. We had to learn this vocabulary set to be able to pass our exams, to be able to have this degree and be able to communicate with our colleagues. But oftentimes when we're creating content, we're not communicating with our colleagues. We're communicating with lay people who are coming to us because of this training that we have. But they don't need to be re-educated and develop a new vocabulary. We actually need to get down to their level.
Mm.
And
That's good.
yeah, and it's really helpful when we can really think about those things, have as few offerings as possible, get off our pedestal of perfection, and really get down to our client's level. It makes a massive difference. And when we understand who we are and what we're trying to do, it allows us to create a congruent foundation that we can use everywhere. We can use it in our sales conversations, in our operation in the world, how we create content. And so this is why we want to do it. When we're congruent, we create clarity. When we're clear, we become more credible. When we're more credible, we become more trustworthy. And when you're trying to develop a brand, especially a personal brand, you want to develop trust with what you're putting out there.
Right.
If you don't have trust, you're not going to get sales.
The know, the like, and the trust.
Exactly. Yes. So how we look at brand archetypes is, there's 4 big camps of how we try to change the world. So some people are trying to create utopia on earth. They're trying to make paradise happen. Some people are trying to leave their stamp on the world and leave a legacy behind them. Some people are trying to create connection. They want to help develop relationship in the world. And then the 4th is providing structure. So they're the people who are trying to order the world, create roadmaps for people to follow. And so what I'd like you to think about right now is, which of these camps do you fall into? Utopia, leaving your mark, creating connection, or providing structure? So for the people who try to create utopia on earth, there's 3 main archetypes that fit into that. The first is the explorer. And with each of these archetypes, the word probably conjures up some images. Now, we're only going through 12 of the major archetypes, but they each have sub-archetypes that fall underneath them. So I'm going to mention those as well, because it'll help you, again, conjure up those images. And if I ask you to name someone in your life who's an explorer, you probably know someone that you can think of that would fit into that. So some of the sub-archetypes of explorer are adventurer, explorer, generalist, pioneer, and seeker. So these people are all trying to blaze their own trail. They don't really want to take the path taken by everybody else. When they come to a fork in the road, they take the road less traveled to try and see how they can find new information to bring back and share with the world. Their goal is to liberate the world, show them that they can create their own path as well. And their strategy is to be an explorer, to explore the world, see what is out there that other people haven't discovered before. When they are on their content, they're exciting. Explorers, you don't think of people who are kind of bored with their life, laid back. They are people who are out there. They are willing to put themselves out there. They're willing to jump off that cliff without a parachute to see what is going to come their way. So they tend to be exciting, they're open-minded, and they're quite resourceful.
And, we look back at some of the major explorers at the turn of the 20th century, and these are people who went to the South Pole or to the North Pole. I mean, these are the kind of people who all these things, they just fit right into that archetype. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so some of the brands that fit with an explorer are NASA, right? They're exploring new worlds completely. You've got Land Rover, who helps you to go beyond what you would normally exist in your day-to-day. And you've got North Face, who supplies you with the outfits to be able to go and face the elements and go and blaze your own trail.
Sure.
And then some characters that you might relate to, think of Indiana Jones, think of Amelia Earhart, right? They were not following anyone else's path. They were out there trying to figure out the world from their own lens.
For sure.
So the next archetype that fits into trying to create utopia is the innocent. And innocents kind of get written off. Sometimes they get written off as Pollyannas. They're people who, they don't see reality, they just see the potential. And I think that's unfortunate because the innocents bring a really interesting perspective to the world that I think we need more than ever. So some of the sub-archetypes, or 5 of the sub-archetypes of innocent, are child, dreamer, idealist, innocent, and muse. So again, those words conjure up images that we can relate to. We can see people in our world who are like that.
Yeah.
Their motto is the glass is half full. Yes, they are optimistic. They will give people the benefit of the doubt. That's how they operate in the world. And their goal really is to create simplicity and happiness. They don't want drama. They don't want any more ingredients than are absolutely necessary to achieve their goal. And they operate through optimism. So again, when people are overly optimistic, sometimes they get written off as not being grounded in reality, or they're a Pollyanna, but that isn't necessarily what's wrong. And there's nothing wrong with them at all. It's just they have a different lens. Yeah. But when people come from a different perspective than someone else, so for example, my archetype is rebel. So when I hear an innocent who's like, oh, everything's perfect, I'm like, really? Are you sure about that? But it's really just, sometimes we have these opposites. And so we don't understand because we're coming from a completely different lens than someone else. But all the archetypes exist in the world and can be extremely successful when they're leaned into. So the innocents tend to be, they're wholesome, they're simple, they're concise, they're cheerful. And some of our brands that will be easy to recognize are like Dove. Part of their campaign is the simplicity of ingredients, right? They're trying to strip away the extra chemicals. We've got Coca-Cola, who's trying to bring out the childlike side of us and help us to get back in touch with that. And some innocent characters that you'll recognize are Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz and Forrest Gump.
Run, Forrest.
Run, Forrest, run, right? He was so sweet in the way he interacted with the world. He couldn't see evil in anyone.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful way for him to exist. The last part of the archetype that tries to create utopia in the world is the sage. So the sub-archetypes of sage include detective, mentor, sage, shaman, and translator. And their motto is the truth will set you free. So these are not people who are jumping into the latest trend. They're going to go in and dig to figure out what is the best way to operate based on information that we have existing. Their goal is to become wise, and their strategy is research. So we've all had clients who fit into this, who you can't just give them the Coles notes or the Cliff notes of why something is going to work. You need to provide them with the white papers and the research on why they should be using this product. And for people who are the opposite of that, this can be really annoying, but this is how they operate, right?
I'm looking at this one going, and this is not me.
I as well. So when they're trying to build their brand, though, they're guiding their research. They're highly intelligent, and they have done the work to be an authority. So it's not their personal experience. They have drawn on the experience of science, of people who have gone before them to be able to bring this collective of knowledge to help others with it. And some sage brands that we interact with on the regular are Morgan Stanley, Google, the Wall Street Journal. These are all resources of information that we highly trust.
Yeah, ask Mr. Google.
Exactly. And some sage characters include Albert Einstein and Bill Gates.
I think this might be my husband.
I think sage is actually one of those easy ones to pull out in our friend circle, because there's always someone who is that, they're the one who digs really deep.
Yes.
So the next grouping are the ones who want to leave their mark on the world. They're the ones trying to create legacy. So the first archetype that fits into that is hero. And the sub-archetypes that fit with hero are athlete, hero, liberator, rescuer, and warrior. And their motto is, where there's a will, there's a way. They see potential inside themselves and inside other human beings. So everything that they're doing is trying to pull that out. And they do it with courage. It takes courage to dig deep, to go, okay, we've achieved this so far, but how can we push that even farther in our human potential? The Olympics just finished up. That is a hero brand. So part of their strategy is to push those human boundaries. We've achieved a lot, but they see that we can achieve so much more. So they're trying to help people to find that potential. Their tone of voice tends to be very powerful, motivational, and self-confident. They're the ones who will tell you, you can just do it. So hero brands include Nike,
Just do
Army,
it.
yeah, exactly, and Snickers. I remember being influenced by Snickers as a kid when I would go to baseball games, and the commercial was that it was power bars and stuff didn't exist back then. So you'd eat a Snickers, and it would give you the energy to be an amazing athlete. And I used
It
to
had the
see
nuts in it, which was the protein and all that good stuff.
exactly, yeah. And I totally got sucked into marketing and would go and buy a Snickers bar before every baseball game.
Now, was it the big king size ones or the little ones or the regular?
There was just regular back then.
Okay.
So
Because
yeah,
now you've seen those giant ones, right?
yes, now there's the giant ones, but yeah, that would have been like 1996. So that was a long time ago. So some characters that you might relate to that fall into the hero category are Harry Potter and Katniss from Hunger Games. Again, striving to find the potential in themselves. So another one that helps to leave their mark on the world are magicians. And magician subarchetypes include alchemist, engineer, innovator, magician, and scientist. And their motto is where dreams come true. So if you can dream it, they will help move mountains to make it happen.
Mm.
Their goal is to transform the world and transform them in ways that people couldn't have even imagined as possible. And sometimes they get a little bit into the mystical side of things. Like when you think of the alchemist, that's transmuting or transforming something from one substance to another, right? And they do the same thing with people. They take them from one state of being to another state of being. They can be mystical. They can be expansive in the way that they talk about things. They don't see limits on what can be achieved. And they also tend to be connected beyond just the material world. They have that spiritual world connected with them as well. Some magician brands include Disney, where dreams come true. TED, which helps us to expand our minds as to the possibilities of what is achievable in our world, as well as Lululemon. And then some magician characters you would recognize are Steven Spielberg and Morpheus from The Matrix.
For sure. And of course, Disney. And the one I've seen as well is Oprah.
Yes. Yeah. She is definitely a magician. And then the last one of the archetypes that fit into leaving your mark on the world are rebel. And this is my main archetype. So sub-archetypes include activist, gambler, maverick, rebel, and reformer. So their motto is rules are made to be broken. And not just for the heck of breaking rules. What rebels try to do is look at what isn't working and ask, why are we still doing it that way? And why aren't we trying to find a better way? So they see the historical way of repeating behaviors as the barrier. And they try to push through those barriers by holding a mirror up to the world and asking why. Their goal is disruption. Not to be destructive, but to help move humanity forward. And they do it by thinking differently. They really aren't contained by the box of the way the majority of the world works. And for this reason, they can often be outsiders because, they're questioning the status quo. They are disrupting the status quo, and that can make them unpopular, and yet they make massive change in the world because of it. Their tone of voice is rebellious, candid, raw, and brutally honest. And I have to laugh when I had my archetyping done years ago. When the brutally honest part came up, I was like, oh yeah, this is why I don't have a filter on my face. I don't have a filter on my mouth. Whatever you ask me, the truth comes out whether I wanted it to or not. And that's just part of how I operate in the world.
Some of us are better with the mask.
Yes. Yeah, my face, when I ran my professional dance company, my students were like, it's so easy to see when you're either like really happy with us or wondering what the F we're doing. There's not really anything in between. So yeah, that lack of facial filter did not exist in my world. So rebel brands that we easily recognize are Virgin, Harley Davidson, and MTD. And then some characters we recognize as well are Meghan Markle and Jack Sparrow. And when we think of Meghan Markle compared to like Princess Diana, they were both in that role. They're both making massive change in the world. But Meghan Markle is holding a mirror up to the world saying, this archaic way of operating isn't working. Whereas Diana was a caregiver. She came out to support the world, to help them to move forward from that position. So we have the ability, no matter what our archetype is, to create massive change in the world. And we're just going to do it from our own perspective, through the products, through the services that we do, through the personality that we bring to what we're actually doing.
But these two, like Meghan Markle and Jack Sparrow, those are very different characters, and they don't sound like Harley Davidson, right? So it
Yeah.
looks like the Rebel has this huge spectrum.
Yes, the Rebel definitely does. They each do. Like when you start digging into it and thinking even about characters that you see in movies, and the more you understand this, the more you're like, oh, that's an athlete, that's this and that. And you start to be able to pull these things in, and you start to be able to track their journey at a completely different level.
Cool.
So the next camp of how people operate in the world is those who create connection. So one of the main ones is the girl or guy next door, also known as the everyman. So subarchetypes include advocate, citizen, guy or girl next door, networker, and servant. So really, they are trying to create community. They want to be inclusive. They want people to feel good because they're part of a community. And so creating community, creating a sense of family is everything for them. And their goal really is to create acceptance for themselves as well as for others. And how they do that is through humility and accessibility. So they are not going to talk over someone's head. They're not going to overcomplicate things. They want to make it so that no matter what level you operate in the world, you would be able to use their product or service. So their tone of voice tends to be humble, friendly, honest, and practical. And some brands that we know quite well, because most of us have used one of these at some point, include IKEA.
Yeah.
It's a very accessible furniture company. Levi's is very much a brand of jeans that we've all worn probably at some point in our lives. And then eBay as well.
Sure.
And then some of the characters that we recognize, Matt Damon and Drew Barrymore, think about who they are in the world and who they tend to play as well. Very accessible. So the next archetype that tends to try to create community and create connection in the world is the jester. And the jester often is written off as not the smartest. And oftentimes the jester is actually the smartest person in the room, but they approach things by letting people bring their guard down because of how they present themselves. They don't present themselves as the smartest person in the room. Sometimes they play the fool, but by playing the fool, they can get people on their side. So subarchetypes include clown, entertainer, jester, provocateur, as well as shapeshifter. And the way that they think about life is you only live once, so you might as well have fun. Their goal is to bring joy while they also change perspective, and they will use humor and levity to do that. Tone of voice tends to be playful, enthusiastic, and joking, even if there's a dark undertone to it, because they're trying to make their point. Some jester brands include Old Spice and M&M.
M&M I see, but Old Spice?
They're very humorous in the way that they approach things. So think more of the modern commercials versus the commercials from like 20 years ago. And then some of the characters that we know play the fool, but they are highly intelligent and they have had a massive impact. Robin Williams and Jimmy Fallon are perfect examples of jesters.
Yeah, a lot of comedians are some of the smartest people because they've figured out ways to actually make fun of and do it in whatever the thing is in a way that helps you think rather than offends you. Now, sometimes they offend, but cool.
They have this really deep understanding of human nature, and they're able to use that to create change in the world. And then the last one who is trying to create connection in the world is the lover. Subarchetypes include companion, hedonist, lover, matchmaker, and romantic. And oftentimes when people get diagnosed as lover, they think of the hedonist side and they kind of go, ick, I don't want to be known for that. But the hedonist side is only one part of it. And there's definitely a sensuality to each of these subarchetypes in lover. And when I say sensuality, I don't mean sexuality, I mean engaging the senses. So the motto is love conquers all. And each of these subarchetypes are trying to use love in some way to actually bring the world together. They're trying to create a relationship. They want to have those long-term relationships with their clients. They want to build those communities where people connect with each other. and are able to have those lifelong friendships. And they also want to pamper the world. So they help people to feel comfortable. They help people to feel good without being at a really high price point. So tone of voice is often sensual, again, engaging the senses, affectionate, warm, and rich. And then some brands that we would all recognize, Godiva Chocolate, Haagen-Dazs, and Victoria's Secret. And those all have that pamper to them, right? They are
Absolutely
not a high-level luxury experience, but they have that sensuality behind them.
Absolutely.
And then some characters that we'd recognize, Adam Levine, Megan Fox, and Joan from Mad Men. So each of those people has that sensory part to them that we're really attracted to.
Cool. That makes sense.
So then the last camp of people, how they operate in the world, are those who provide structure. So the first of those archetypes is caregiver. And the sub-archetypes that are angel, caregiver, guardian, healer, and Samaritan. And their motto is to do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. So they put themselves out there to support the world, but they also expect that support back. So they're not there to be stepped on and squashed by the world. They're there to elevate the world because of how they take their knowledge and share that to elevate everyone else. Their goal is to be supportive. Their strategy is generosity of time, of energy, of knowledge. They tend to be reassuring, considerate, thoughtful, and generous with the world. And some of our brands for caregiver, oftentimes caregiver also includes food. So think about Heinz. Johnson & Johnson is a product that we use to take care of ourselves and our children. And then we've got Tom's, who gives back to the world through their products when we purchase them. Some caregivers, again, are Princess Di and J.K. Rowling. So again, we've got the way to operate in the world can be very different, doing the same job from very different perspectives. So again, that contrast between Di and Meghan Markle. Then we have the creator. And the creator includes artist, creator, entrepreneur, storyteller, and visionary. So they believe your imagination is the only limit. How they try to operate in the world is through innovation and perfection. So they want to create an expansive brand that changes the world, but they're not just going out there and being disruptive and breaking things. What they're doing is trying to create something that is going to create a legacy with what they've actually created. So that's where the perfection comes in.
Interesting.
Their tone of voice is imaginative, unique, and metaphor-rich. And one of the best examples for the metaphor-rich version of creator is, remember when iPods first came out? Their metaphor for it was 10,000 songs in your pocket. And really, that's what it was, which is amazing. Whoever came up with that was absolutely brilliant. So some of our brands include Apple, Lego, and Adidas. And the difference between like Apple and IBM is more that tried and true research-based. So they're more the sage brand approach to the computing industry, whereas Apple is more that innovative, expansive thinking approach to it as well. So they're still creating products that work, but they have very different approaches and very different fan bases because of that.
And then Lego, you can do anything with Lego.
Exactly.
They've even got their show now with adults building these amazing things, and they got movies and everything that they've built on it. I guess in my mind, I think of creator as artists, right? It's really hard to get past certain terms in your brain. Yeah.
And creator in the business world, yes, artist fits into that, but oftentimes the brands that we know the best are the ones that are technologically innovative. And then some of the characters that would be attributed to creator as well are Adele, who is an artist, and then also Don Draper from Mad Men. And then last but not least, people who are in the business world oftentimes have at least a little bit of ruler in them if they're not dominated by ruler. And sub-archetypes of this include ambassador, judge, patriarch, ruler, and sovereign. And how they operate in the world is power isn't everything, it's the only thing. So they want to dominate, they want to be the best in the market, they want to crush the competition.
Yikes.
And their goal is influence and exclusivity, right? So these, we talked about with Lover, we have that sensuality of brand pamper. The exclusivity, these are those luxury products that are out of reach for a lot of people. So complete opposite to the girl or guy next door. Their strategy, dominate the market. They tend to be very commanding, refined, and articulate. And some ruler brands that are easy to recognize are Mercedes-Benz, Louis Vuitton, as well as Rolex. So again, those high price point exclusive brands that very few have the funds to actually access.
Yeah.
And some characters that are rulers are The Godfather, Mustafa, and The Lion King.
Wow. The Godfather.
Oh my God. Right? Leader. Yeah, crushing the competition, but also someone who is leading a group of people to the end point that he wanted.
Yeah.
So when I help people with archetypes, really what I want you to take away is how to actually use this. So if you saw yourself in some of these archetypes, and there's probably a few that you went, oh yeah, I can, that's probably part of me. Then I want you to think about, how your archetype affects your presence. So if you're building a brand or you're building content, how can that inform how you put yourself out there? Because there's so many different ways that we can operate in the world. There's so many ways that we can explain the same thing. So how can you use that lens of your archetype to explain it in a way that people go, if I had to guess, they're probably this. How can you use it to guide your interactions? How can you use that motto of how you operate in the world to guide your interactions and do a better job of being clear in the marketplace? And then again, how can you use it to support your content? How can you use it to create a vocabulary that is recognizable as being that archetype? So if you are struggling with this or you want more information, I'm always happy to have a chat with anyone. You can always send me an email at angela@unleashinginfluence.com. And it would be my pleasure to share some time with your audience.
There we go. And I've got your website up there at the end. I took so many notes. And I'm curious. I have questions.
Sure.
And I did put, I did put the quiz in there, and I put the quiz in all of the announcements for this, and this in my Facebook group will go over into the guide section. So it will be there in the comments, and it'll have how people can take the quiz and your website. Plus, of course, again, Angela, you were my guest on my podcast that aired this Monday with all that information in the show notes of every place that we can find you. So we have just a few minutes here. If you have still a few minutes,
Yes,
I have a quandary, because is it possible to have a brand archetype for one type of business that you do and a totally different brand archetype for another business that you do?
Yes.
Okay.
And oftentimes when I have clients come to me, they have an existing business and they're about to pivot and launch into another one. So maybe they're selling the previous one and moving into the next one, or they're building another branch. And when we go through the brand archetypes, what we're trying to do is figure out who you are. And then what we can do is pull out the archetypes that fit with that business and how you want that business to be perceived moving forward when you're representing it. So for example, one of my clients, she is for sure a ruler in her existing brand, but as she moves into this more mature role with this new endeavor that she's moving into, she wants to pull more of the stage, the experience that she's had, and not operate as a ruler. So we have the ability to pick and choose, and you'll find in your life, certain situations pull out a certain part of you, and other situations push those back in. So yes, there's so much dimensionality and fluidity to how we use our archetypes. It's just being aware of what those main things are and how we can actually use them in our business.
Because that feels like there's a little bit of it's not like something that you're born with, that's set in stone, that's the only thing you can ever be, which is great, because I've taken probably 6 or 8 of these and I've come out with 6 or 8, depending on, and you can skew every single one of these quizzes. It's kind of like being new to the Enneagram. It's like you can take the Enneagram or you can take the Myers-Briggs, and then it'll give you what you're testing out as, right? Or diagnose, I think is the word you used. But then when you sit down with somebody who actually is a coach in this area, they can say, okay, I understand that you tested out as this 2 or 3 times, but what I'm hearing from you is actually this. And I'm like, yes, that's me. That makes so much more sense.
Right.
So in that vein, like I said earlier, I took your quiz and I've put the quiz link for people to check out in the notes. But I've taken other people's quizzes before, and here's the interesting thing. I tested out in yours different than I did in anybody else's.
Okay.
Now I wonder too, so that's why I was asking, is it possible that as I've grown through my journey, maybe that's a little bit of a difference?
Hmm.
But here's another thing I noticed. All the other ones I've ever taken are picture based,
Okay.
which I think is a really interesting point because when you show somebody a picture, that creates a whole world in your mind.
Right.
And it, um, I went through two or three different picture quizzes from different people because I was like, well, surely. And I came up with, most of the time, I come up with the explorer, the girl next door, and the magician. And every
Mhm.
once in a while, the innocent would show up. I am the intentional optimist, right? So, but part of that is a choice, right? So the hero didn't really show up ever. And but then this last, for some reason, the last time I took it recently, it was weird. It was like royalty showed up, and I'm like, that is not who I am. I'm shopping at Goodwill, right? It's like I'm
Yeah.
Stitch Fix, and so royalty's not necessarily. Um, but your quiz is all words.
Hmm.
There's no pictures, and it made me sit there and think, what does it mean to say this, or this?
Right.
And I found I was curious to see how it would turn out because I thought, am I answering this different than I would based on the pictures
Right.
for a particular archetype? Are you ready? You don't happen to know what you don't have access to any of those. You haven't looked or anything. Do you know what I tested out as?
I didn't go and look ahead of time, so it happened.
Now I'm on
Surprise!
your mailing list. It's like big drum roll. I tested out as rebel. And what's really funny is I have a couple of friends. I said, I tested out as a rebel. And one of them goes, well, duh. I thought, wait a minute. I don't look like a rebel, right? I
You
don't,
don't have to look like a rebel. It's how you operate and how you think. And I find, like, when you interviewed me, you are someone who's asking those why questions. You are trying to help people to think differently. So that makes complete sense to me why you'd come out as that.
and so when you said, was it Meghan Markle that's the rebel?
Mhm.
Um, I thought, okay, now that's a rebel I can identify with. And, but part of it is, I think as a rebel that because all the pictures are always like you said, I don't mind wearing leather and lace. That's why I wear leather and lace. I'm like, I don't wear leather and lace, and I wear like pearls and
Mhm.
but I have always been the quote unquote black sheep. And I have always been the one on the outs. And I have always been the one that says, but. And then when you started describing the whole, we look at how things have been done historically and consider that to be the problem
Mhm.
and say, can we not just stop here for a minute and take a deep breath and look at doing it differently moving forward? I cannot tell you how many times in my career in university work that I said, can we just see if we could do this differently moving forward? Because clearly nobody's happy doing it this way. And I just never thought of myself as a rebel. This was revelatory for me.
Yeah. Well, what I find is the difference between the words and the picture ones. The picture ones, the person creating the quiz could have an interpretation of that picture that is not the same interpretation as you,
Yep.
right? And so when I help people go through a brand archetyping quiz, when I do use the picture part of it, I want them to explain to me why they think that picture is why they
Mm,
choose it, because that gives me so much more insight into versus my lens of like, obviously, if they pick this picture, it means this, right? It
right.
may not mean that at all to them because of the history that they have with experience in their world. So that's why I like the words part of it, because it is a bit more objective.
Yeah, and I like that it speaks to a different audience as well. But one of the other things I noticed for you too is there's different levels of how we work with people. We have different client levels, and you talk a lot to professionals, and I love that. We're professionals, and we have this thing that we're supposed to do, and we're supposed to look like, and um, breaking the whole professional mold is really fun to me right now. And being able to say, yeah, I'm in jeans, it's okay. I don't need to wear a blazer. But the other piece of that is there are, people who do brand archetyping that work with people on like a very DIY basis. And, so here's a quiz, take it. And some people, that's like their jam, right? They're totally, I'm DIY. You're much more curated. You're much more personalized. And because I'm sitting here thinking, there is some girl next door in there for me. There is some explorer in there for me. So it's not 100% rebel, but I think that at my core, that really is who it is, which this was. So even just as like, oh, I'm going to prep for this. I'm going to prep for this talk. Oh my gosh, look at that.
Yeah.
So, so the best way, so when you work with people, you work strictly on a one-to-one basis?
I do have a couple of online courses. So I have the LinkedIn Level Up, which will take you through the brand archetyping, just the 12 big ones, not the 60 total, and help you to thread that through your content, through building your audience, through your brand story. I do have Captivate Your Audience as well, which is an online course. It's 5 weeks and quite in depth and teaches you those skills to be great on camera, which is part of what, when I work with people one-on-one, I work with these amazing experts that when you stick a camera in their face, they go,
I know.
They just completely freeze, or they go into that perfection mode of, I have to be a professional. So those are two of the entry points where you can do a bit more do it yourself and really dive into that. But then when people want to take a deep dive and really understand this and take their brand to the next level, that's where the one-on work comes from. And as you're talking about, the different pieces of your archetype, we go through the 60 different archetypes to figure out, which pieces actually make the most sense. And oftentimes what they thought was the leader, when we start digging into it, sometimes that one is completely out because there's so many other pieces that make sense to them. And so we pull in those pieces that really give the true dimensions of who they are.
Cool. Well, can you tell I find this fascinating? And I know that many of our listeners will. And I know that as we place this over in the guides in the Facebook group, it will be one that people will be able to watch over and over again. And again, unleashinginfluence.com is your website. I've put the quiz in there if you want to take that. And if that's all you do, then that at least will give you some information. And if you've never looked at brand archetypes, trust me, if you're any kind of business owner, this is something you want to know about yourself and about your brand. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to just leave us with?
No, I think that was pretty in depth. So I appreciate the time to share my passion and my wisdom with your audience. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been a delight. And y'all check out her website. And you also come and do speaking and all kinds of stuff. And you've got some really beautiful stuff out there on YouTube. I've seen that where you kind of show your dancing ability and some of your the way that you do interpretive speaking and that kind of stuff. So it's really beautiful. So check out Angela and all her offerings that she has today. So thank you so much for being here.
You are so welcome.
Have a great day.
Bye.